Hello, and welcome to another session of E Afterworks. It's been a month since we did the last session, so it feels so good to be back again. And today we're going so low level, and we are talking about something very interesting, very trendy. It's almost everywhere. We're talking about LangChain. Uh, Daniel is joining us to from LangChain to talk about all the details of that framework. So if you're watching now or watching later with the when you with the recording, you're gonna get a lot of knowledge, a lot of juice out of this. Daniel, thank you very much for accepting the invitation to you after work. It's so great to have you here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation, Aziz. And yeah, happy to connect to everybody. And yeah, I'm Daniel from LangChain. I work in the infra team. But yeah, just working a lot on everything AI related.
Yeah, before we go deep into the details of LangChain, yeah, let's hear a little bit about you. I know we started talking about that, but we said we're gonna postpone this until the live session. So yeah, it's the right time to talk about where did you come from in terms of experience, what was your background, etc. Do you want to give us a few words about that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been working with software engineering and infrastructure for more years than I want to remember. So I think I'm more than 10, maybe it's getting 15 now. I lost count. But I started in computer vision actually many years ago, and it was on that field that I saw the potential of back in the day machine learning. Right, it was not AI was not like a mainstream term yet, but in computer vision was super strong because of if you have a problem that is you don't have too well defined constraints, you
Mm-hmm.
need like some kind of machine learning application to be able to work around those environments and scenarios never seen before. So machine learning was super strong there, and that's when I got hooked into that kind of thing. That was back in Brazil. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in the Netherlands for about 4.5 years now. But yeah, back in Brazil, we developed this project to read documents from images and extract information from them, which is super
Mm-hmm.
useful for automated onboarding, like in banks and things like that. And the company grew a lot, and that's when I moved from machine learning to infrastructure because we had a product that was working well and we had to deploy it reliably. And I moved to infra and I never left because infra problems they never stop. And I've been working with infra, Kubernetes, cloud environments, public cloud for the past, I don't know, 7, maybe more years.
Wow.
Uh, and that's when I landed on LangChain, which is now this nice overlap between foundational software, foundational infrastructure with machine learning and now AI. And now I'm kind of in between. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
that's a great path. Congratulations on that. Yeah, you mentioned something very interesting when you talked about switching from an area of work which has many things to do with the AI, but now you're going more on the infra side of the AI. So you went, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you went from like the product layer to the lower layer now. So you're focusing more on the infra layer, and I've seen many people transition from product roles or building on the upper layer or the high level layer, now go in and transition into the low level layer. Is that because AI is doing the first section, or what's your take on that?
I can easily say not my situation specifically, just because I transitioned before AI,
Hmm.
but I can definitely say that now I'm capable of building products again,
Hmm.
with a ton of help of AI, right? So my focus for the past few years, many years, are on infrastructure side of things, so the design of the solution, that kind of things.
Hmm.
Definitely not front end. I know a little bit more about backend because it developed for a few years, but it's old knowledge. So I would take it. It would take a while for me to catch up after those years. But now with AI, I can at least get something that works reasonably well, super fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we the product that I'm developing on LangChain is related to sandboxes, but you need to provide a UI for the user. You need to have a backend. You need to have an SDK. You need to have all those standard procedures like to CRUD, create, read, manage the resources, and all of that. You can pretty much get something working, get it up to speed really, really well, just
Mm.
yeah, by using AI. So
Yeah,
now I'm kind of privileged to be able to do that because I can have AI now backing me up.
perfect. Yes. So when you say that now was a, do you think that what you're doing now can be qualified as an AI engineering job, or more, that has more another title? And I want to hear from you. How do you define the AI engineer? I've seen a couple of posts a couple of days ago, and some people they say that the AI engineering is just prompt engineering. You're just basically taking everything, putting it in a workflow, and you're prompting your agents to 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 do what you want them to do using those like high level abstraction layers, rather than going into the internals of each component. Where do you stand on that? Do you see that the AI engineers should be aware of uh, the underlying internals, I mean the infrastructure, or do you think that just the AI engineer should be just a drag and drop engineer?
In terms of titles, I still like the idea of a software engineer. I think is generic enough that can withstand time. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, if we go too specific, we're gonna change titles every 6 months, and then things won't make too much sense. My
Yeah,
personal take.
especially with all the changes that happen in every every couple of years.
Yeah, and and tech in general, right? It never stays the same. So I can safely say that throughout my career, I never did the same thing for more than 2 years, and I think that's part of the skill set that you need to work in the field in general, not
Hmm.
only especially about AI. But if you focus on software engineering skills, for me personally, I see AI as a yet another tool, right? So
Hmm.
you can become specialized in it and learn all these ins and outs for you to know how to use it the best. And
Yeah.
if you learn enough, you can even become a specialist. But you can do the same with any other tool, right? You can do the same with Linux internals. You can do the same with I don't know, networking, and it goes on, right? And AI or applied AI or this knowledge that is now being created on how to use uh, LLMs properly and agents properly, it's going
Hmm.
to be yet another tool that you can go as deep as you want.
Hmm.
You can be the one creating new approaches to it, or you can be one learning to use it to build something else, right? So in
Yeah.
my case specifically, I wouldn't say I'm using more AI that I'm building agents, but I'm using agents and AI to build something that agents can use,
Hmm.
basically.
So to follow up on this, if we qualify the job of an AI engineer as just a component of the software engineer, namely nowadays, I can already tell that there is the optimization component, which is like a major component for any software engineer. I mean, the first things that you learn as a software engineer is the complexity of your loops, or how they grow, or big O of n. So, with having that in mind, you need to know the lower layers so that you can optimize your workflows. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, like the more you know, the better you do. So it's always good to go as deep as you can, and you have time for.
Yeah.
And that will go for harnessing agents or anything really. Yeah, I would say.
Mm. How do you define harness in how or creating harness around agents?
Yeah, so it's a broad term, but
Hmm.
what I understand about harness is everything that you put around an agent that would allow it to do a job in a way that is more expected, is more
Hmm.
it gives it more tools, it gives it more basically is a toolkit, I would say,
Hmm.
of a lot of things that you make it available for the agent for it to perform better. So it goes like in on the lines of prompt optimization, because then you can guide the agent more to do the things that you want it to do,
Mm-hmm.
and avoid wasting time on infinite loops and things like that. But it also has control. It helps you control memory, context, and summarization and memory management. So all the tools around an agent that is supposed to run for a long period of time, uh, I would classify as a harness that you can use.
All right. So if I take this and project it on LangChain, what you're doing at LangChain with all the products, including the Langsmith, etc., is making the creation of those harness easier, correct? Or
Yeah, wait, actually, like if you look at the deep agents framework,
yeah.
it's basically a harness that you can build your agent on top
Yeah.
and go very up to speed on building like complex agents at ease.
Mm-hmm.
So I could, I'm not sure if it's totally correct, to be honest. It might be my take on it, on what I understood about harness.
And we're
But
gonna
it,
take it. No problem.
but like the deep agents framework is the harness, or at least it's a good part of the harness of your agents if you decide to use deep agents, right? Because I don't know if
Yeah.
more people know that there is this framework called deep agents, also from
Yeah.
LangChain, that it basically gives
It
batteries to your agent,
it
right?
gives you the possibility to build your own cloud, basically.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so a repo that we have there side by side is the Deep Agent CLI, which is a cloud coding tool,
Yeah.
which is a showcase of what you can build on top of the framework.
Yeah. Before diving into the details of a deep agent, can you explain to us what is the difference between an agent, simple one, and a deep agent, and if everything that now people are building should be deep agent, or we can also have just like the regular simplistic agents? What do you think of for this?
Yeah, I would say that a simple agent, which falls into the category of LangChain, right? Because LangChain, the company that we have basically three main frameworks, right? So we have LangGraph, LangChain, Deep Agents.
Mm-hmm.
LangGraph is the lowest level. You have the most amount of control, but it also can be a little bit complex to get up to speed. LangChain is built on top of LangGraph, so it gives you a little bit more constraints. It's simpler, and you
Is,
can
is,
build an agent.
isn't it the opposite? It's LangChain, and then LangGraph is built on top of LangChain.
No, LangChain operates on top of LangGraph actually,
Okay.
and Deep Agents operates on top of both. Yeah.
Okay.
So the LangGraph is the lowest level of abstraction with the highest level of control.
Mm-hmm.
So you can build really complex agents. You can control memory, short-term memory, checkpointing, reliability, all yourself. The framework gives you the means to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
you control. LangChain operates on top of it. And then Deep Agents basically try to combine both with a lot of other things to help you build complex agents like coding agents that we see.
Okay, so the way I understand LangGraph and the way I've been using it is you take your workflow, you translate it into a graph, basically, and then each graph is going to be a node where you have or not. I mean, it's not it's some of that. You have a couple of operations. Those operations can be deterministic without calling the LLM, and then some operations can be non-deterministic when you use the language model. And for that language model, you either provide it with tools, or you can just be like something like one-shot thing or whatever you want. Uh, so you're telling me that LangChain take everything here and just abstract it and say you want to build something, you define it in a couple of words, not words, a couple of, and then it builds the graph underneath your intent, correct?
Yeah, and that's what the actual Deep Agents, you can even regenerate it. Deep Agents it does that, exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of you having to build the graph all by yourself and all the tools and everything,
Yeah.
you have a nice abstraction on top that you can just say the system prompt, the tools as a list,
Hmm.
and the deep pages library will generate the graph for you, and you can even troubleshoot it later or work on top of it later if you want.
Okay.
But yeah, deep pages does this for sure. LangChain, I know that operates on top of LangGraph, but I don't know if you have the access to the graph. That I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Yeah. So for someone who wants more control, wants to have to see everything they're doing, LangGraph is the way to go, right?
Yeah, it's the one that you have the most amount of control, but it's also the one that takes the is it has the steepest learning curve.
Hmm.
So if anyone, I would say that if you want to get started and see how things flow, I would even start with either LangChain or deep agents. And LangChain will allow you to build those more simple agents, right? So you can basically go into this cycle of making an API call to an LLM, get a response, process it, try to do things with it.
Yeah.
You go in a back and forth this way. So LangChain allows you to build more simple agents, but it doesn't have context optimization. It doesn't have memory
Hmm.
management. It will not allow you to offload things. It doesn't have subagents, abstractions. So you're not gonna have anything like that, right? On LangChain, you have just a simple agent that responds to human prompts, right?
Right.
Uh, but deep agents will give you all of that without the hassle of understanding everything about LangGraph. So my suggestion would be like to start the from the LangChain or deep agents libraries because they have the highest levels of abstraction. And then if you feel the need, then you go on LangGraph.
Perfect. So all those components that you mentioned that are part of the LangChain ecosystem, they still require from you to have a certain knowledge of software engineering and development when you're coding. How do you see this compared to the drag and drop uh, frameworks that are out there? Do, do- or do you have something that is similar to drag and drop at LangChain?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing. It's just that you don't necessarily need software engineering to be able to build an agent nowadays.
Yeah.
It's just that if you want to build the best or a really, really good one, you always gonna benefit from having software engineering knowledge to
Hmm.
know what to look for, what to optimize, and things like that. But if you want to just get started or at least get something up and running, you definitely don't need.
Hmm.
So LangChain on the product LangSmith, we have a feature that allows you to create an agent out of a prompt. So we call it Fleet. And you basically just get an UI with a prompt. You ask it to build an agent for you, and if it needs answers, if it needs if it has questions about the agent that you want to build, it will ask you like a coding agent sometimes ask you to clarify things,
Hmm.
and it will build an agent for you. It will give you an agent that you can export later. You can run it on LangSmith deployments. So you can totally do that. You ask it to build an agent out of a prompt. And if you say, I want to build an agent that goes on this GitHub repo every day and checks this thing, it will automatically hook it up with the GitHub tool. It will ask you for your credentials, and you basically have an agent running. This is on LangSmith, by the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you do have it.
I've seen a recent drop of the new product of Cloud, and they're trying to do, or they succeeded in doing the same thing. Basically, what he did is he prompt the the UI, and then you get a YAML file with all the steps. And basically, there is a script that would take this and translate it into an actual agent. And it's exactly the same thing that you described when it comes to like the, and this is available on Locksmith, you say?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
it's a product of LangSmith, and you can export the agent if you want, but you don't even need to. So like we have on LangChain many, many guys from marketing department or sales that they use it internally to prospect customers. We use it on the day to day for ourselves, and non-technical people use it as well
Okay.
to do those kind of analysis. Maybe go on LinkedIn and try to figure out an org chart for a potential customer, so you know who to reach for. We have
Yeah.
agents that do that, and non-technical people you build the agent, right? Build it because they basically just ask it, give me this agent, and yeah, you have an
Yeah.
agent. So you definitely can do that. It's a big market, like no code agents,
Mhm.
and LangChain also has that. Yeah, it's basically an option depending on how deep you want to go.
Yeah, but as you said, for if you are building something for enterprise level that cares about optimization and security and all of those aspects, you should actually not do that approach and go for the building from scratch or building by code and not no code. Correct?
Yeah, so I think that the flow is it would be something like you can totally do a no code approach to prototype, like validate an idea.
Hmm.
And one of the big things of AI today, right? You can validate an idea in less than a week,
Yeah.
or at least have the prototype ready in a day or two.
P-
And
P-
that
POC time went from 1 year to 1 month.
Yeah, or even less, honestly. So you can really go crazy with testing out ideas.
Hmm.
So you use a no code approach to see if an agent that does something like this it's useful, if people are interested. Once you know it's interesting, then you move out of the no code to a more reliable setup, a more optimized agent that doesn't waste calls going on places that it shouldn't. Then you invest on prompt optimization, and then you have one agent that is iterated on, and you improve it over time.
Oh, perfect. Um, when we talk about the market of agent building, and let's say enterprise agent building, um, I mean, LangChain has a predominant place in the market. Do you how is the market actually? Do you see any competitors out there? What are your I mean, where do you stand in that market? And do you see like that this market is growing, or do you see it being monopolized, or how do you see that?
We definitely have competitors because the Langsmith, the product itself, right? The folk was initially focused on observability and monitoring of agents, and
Mhm,
there are alternatives in the market for that, even open source ones, yes.
mhm,
But LangChain is trying to expand to not only observe or yeah, it's basically trying to support agents on every front. So
mhm,
you have the open source frameworks that helps you build an agent, right? And
mhm.
that's completely open source. It's free. Everybody can do it. And yeah, it's really hard to know where it's not being used. It's used across
It's
many,
everywhere.
many. It's everywhere. But then you have the paid products like Langsmith, which is then assuming that you have built an agent or you have something. Okay, how do I make it production ready? How do I monitor it over time? How I make sure it works properly? And that's the paid products comes in. And Langsmith was built initially focusing on observability, which, yeah, as I said, it has many competitors, but it's expanding to support on every front.
Mhm,
So what I mean by that, not only you can monitor, but you can also run the agent, right? So if you have an agent on a GitHub repo, you can deploy it with a click of a button on Langsmith deployments, and
mhm,
it just becomes automatically reliable. It recovers from errors automatically. You have monitoring built in to see how the agent is performing, running in the cloud, etc. So you not only observe the agent, you can run it as well. You can expose the agent through a HTTP web server on the internet, or interact with it externally if you want.
yeah.
And you also have tools now to not only observe what the agent is doing, but see how good it's doing. So you
Mhm,
have evals and to evaluate external, to get some external validation of the responses and things like that. And
mhm,
now also to support those more complex agents, those deep agents, we are also now having sandboxes as well. So try to give agent its own machine to really do whatever it wants.
Yeah, I want to talk about evals, but before talking about this, what is like the 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 platform or the layer behind it? Is it like some clusters of Kubernetes that you manage and then you span the agent in pods? How does it work? I don't know if you can speak about this, but how does it work behind the scenes for Langsmith? Is it like an
Yeah,
abstract layer that manages all of this? Uh,
yes, exactly, exactly. I can tell. I can tell. Like in general, the infrastructure behind it is not something super fixed or proprietary, or yeah, it's not something crazy. So it's something that we definitely take a lot of from open source as well. So yeah, the not only Lanksmith itself, but also the agents, they run on top of Kubernetes, but we build an abstraction on top with few operators and other things
mhm,
to have all of that transparent to the user. So the exposure with an API to the internet, the monitoring, those kind of things we build on top. But under the hood, Kubernetes, the agent automatically becomes a container image that gets deployed.
mhm.
And yeah, so nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy, but there are a lot of optimizations on top to make sure that we can automatically recover from a specific yeah, behavior that you see. And the monitoring, you have the revisions. So it's just a more like a neat way, an easy way to run the agents. And you have the tracing of the agents automatically integrated. So that's a neat thing that is different than if you try to run the agent yourself, because you're going to have to wire it up all yourself. If you decide to run the agent on Langsmith, you have like a very easy flow from the agent running to the traces it produces, you know.
Yeah. So
So
I've
those,
tried tracing with Langsmith, and it's actually so easy. You don't even have to do anything. You just like create a couple of environment variables, and then that's it. It's already built in LangChain and LangGraph, and it's basically just against the traces.
yeah, yeah. So that's what we are aiming for actually, is to kind of build this ecosystem that make it so easy for you to use all the features in one
Hmm.
go. Because, but yeah, under the hood, there's nothing crazy. It's just like the standards that we all know in the industry, Kubernetes, public cloud, and those kind of things. At least
Hmm.
for now. I don't know, will I see in a year or two, but for now, it's still quite standard.
Yeah, and you have two offering for this. You have the on-premise and then the cloud one, correct? Or,
Yes, so Langsmith, we have the cloud, and we also have the on-prem, the self-hosted.
hmm.
So if the company, the business is interested in running it themselves, maybe they have some data requirements where they need to keep things tight. So we see that a lot in financial institutions and things like that.
Hmm.
You can just yeah, run it yourself, and there are docs for that and everything. And this year, probably end of Q2.
Hmm.
Don't quote me on that, but we're gonna also have a bring your own cloud approach. So
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
a neat way that you can still retain your data, maintain your compliance, but we manage all the infra for you, so you don't need to worry about the details behind it. So BYOC is coming as well.
Yeah, so you're solving basically all the sovereignty problems and all the data and the residency problems. That's very
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that's cool. And how does the pricing work? Is it based on licenses or data transfer? What is it based on?
yeah, right now, as far as I know, is based on amount of traces,
Hmm.
but it depends on the product that you use. So I think
Hmm.
if you decide to use Landsmith deployments, might be uptime of agents. Then I'm not 100% sure, but it depends on the product that you use. Yeah. So Sandbox is going to be uptime of boxes and hardware reserved and things like that. Traces is the amount of traces as of now.
Hmm. So Langsmith deployment is standalone product. It's not included with the Langsmith that that it's out there now. Or what is it?
It's a good question. It is in within Langsmith, but I'm not sure if you get it as an on-demand based. To be
Okay.
honest, I'm not sure. I think it depends on your contract you can reserve, and
Hmm.
if you decide to use something you didn't buy upfront, then it becomes on-demand pricing.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure about that, to be honest.
All right. And for individual contributors that are not part of an organization, or for students who wanted to get their hands dirty and start testing with those frameworks. Is there a way, or for example, to test Langsmith tracing and Langsmith deployments?
I heard that they were working on that. I'm not sure if it's available already, like a student plan or something like that. But I heard that they were looking into that. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So, from your journey in building agents, what do you see is the most critical uh, component or element that we need to take into consideration when building those agents? Do you see something that, like some pattern that people have, or some pitfalls that you see that people are not paying attention to that and they should?
I would definitely say there are a few things
Mm-hmm.
that I would say that definitely they are not so clear if you come from like traditional software development, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things is you test the agent once or twice and you see it does the same thing. You want to believe it will always do the same thing, and if you don't monitor those calls over time,
Uh,
once every, I don't know, 100 times, it might go into an infinite loop, and then it absolutely destroys your budget on the Netherlands provider, right?
uh-huh.
And that is like one thing that is quite interesting to see it happen, because you don't know where it's coming from. You don't understand why it happened. It never happened before. It might not happen again. But if you don't keep an eye on it, it's a matter of like because now the software, it's stochastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It You need to have different levels of constraints, and you need to really keep an eye on those things. So the same way that we deploy services and we limit the CPU and memory,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be able to limit what the agent will do, what the loops will be, and those things, that, yeah, how much tokens is sending, and even like a budget wise constraints, right? If you spend more than, I don't know, 1,000 in the last hour, stop now please, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
because it really can catch you off guard. So the monitoring part of the behavior of the agent, I would say, is a key thing. And it's clear that's why LangSmith was great, and that's why many others are out there in the market as well, is to help people to do that. So definitely that one, don't assume the agent will do what it did on your machine, because the same idea, right? We created all those infrastructure abstractions and patterns and standards, because what happens in your machine is not what happens in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
Now, or anywhere else. And now, not only that, but even if you have the exact same code, the exact same depends, exact same everything, you still don't know what's going to happen now.
Yeah,
Now
and
it's,
that's a very interesting point, because when we build an agent, we don't do, or we don't make that switch mentally from the deterministic to non-deterministic behavior. So we're getting the result, and we're assuming that this result is repetitive, reproducible, where it's not, basically. So you need, as you said, as long as you don't have other components in your workflow that would control what's going in and what's going out, then you should not deploy in production, basically. And
yeah,
mm,
or at least like it's now it's a matter of like a risk management, right?
mhm,
More than certainty, because how do you build a CI for an agent, right? You execute all your tests, you did that, I don't know, even like a load test, but still you don't know, right?
yeah.
So it's that trick thing of being able to manage the risk while you use it is a key thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I wanted to dig deeper in the control plane of those agents, I would say that, and I want you to correct me on that or challenge me on that. The two components are the evals and the guardrails.
Yes, so basically about the evals are no more, which is, yeah, this idea of like being able to see the feedback from users, right, as well,
Mhm.
which also helps. But yeah, you can, I know that also on Lensmith you can even build data sets on top of batch tests, right?
Hmm.
So you test it with a larger data set, and then you see the performance of the agent over time. It helps with prompt optimization, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also there. Yeah.
How do you see like the because if I think the evals, there are two categories of evals. There's like the online evals and then the offline evals. The online is basically on every run, where every call of the agent, and the offline is when, what you do when you build an agent and all the benchmarking and everything. Um, do you think that because the online ones would, I would assume that they would consume more tokens than, so basically what you're doing is in your response that you get, you run it to an LM as a judge, and you're trying to figure out if that reply that you got is within the scope of what you wanted to do or not. And this consumes a lot of tokens. But do you see like adoption of this, or what is like the trend? Do you see that people are adopting these practices even if they are expensive, or they should do? What's your philosophy? I mean, it's an open question.
Uh, I mean, the honest in terms of human behavior, that didn't change, right?
Hmm.
So people will adopt those when they see the need, I would say.
Hmm.
Definitely people adopting, but you're gonna see adoption of those things more on the more production ready agents, where
Hmm.
you are at the optimization phase, right?
Yeah.
You don't see that much when it's just like a new agent getting developed and tested, MVP'd.
Hmm.
But you definitely see on the more well-known agents, they're already core of an offering of a company, maybe.
Hmm.
Then you're gonna definitely see evals being used heavily to optimize the agent over time.
Yeah.
Even if it's more expensive, to be honest, because it's something that you need to build a data set for. Otherwise, you cannot improve over time. Otherwise, you don't even know if you're improving at all.
Hmm.
Uh, so you definitely have that, but you're gonna see those on more well used agents.
Yeah, it's something that also I also noticed with LangChain LangGraph. You have a lot of built-in guardrails. You have like the personal information ones, the deterministic ones, and non-deterministic ones. And I think it's something also that is important for you as a um, uh, framework of agent building. Correct? Like
Yeah,
that.
also obfuscation of data as well, right? So the
Yeah.
output automatically obfuscate likely
Mhm.
credentials and things like that. Yeah, that's has to be there by default. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you talked about Langsmith and the observability side of the agent. So for you, what should we observe in an agent? What are the key metrics that, or let's just say, put it broadly and say, what should we observe in an agent?
Yeah, there are a few key metrics that, yeah, the most one obvious one is also, yeah, token usage, I would say, per prompt.
Hmm.
So you can see, or something that is so it's easy to optimize, right? How much the LLM is giving you back in terms
Hmm.
of response, because you can totally ask it to be more brief, and that becomes cheaper, also easier to process. Is
Yeah.
so token users per prompt over time, and amount of tools or loops or called over time for the same for similar requests.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you have a chatbot, right, that helps customers to decide their product, they usually going to start with just prompting or asking for a product.
Hmm.
And how many times this agent goes on an interaction on a back and forth that takes, I don't know, 100 or 50 back and forth with a human versus like two or three. So that could be a measurement of how fast my agent is helping or solving the problem and things like that. So
Hmm.
amount of tool calls or token usage per prompt. Those would be key metrics.
Hmm.
But also, always, I would say, always give the chance to the user to say if the agent was good or not,
Hmm.
even though a lot of people won't say it. many will, right? Many users will give that feedback if they got their response or answer back properly, and that tells a lot about the behavior over time. Actually, that's, I would say, is one of the most the key metrics. Is the agent being useful or not, right? So give the opportunity to the user to give a feedback, I say.
Yeah, and if you compare, so basically what you're saying is build fast, put the product out there, and get the feedback from the user, so that you can have a data set that you can leverage to ameliorate and enhance your agents. Correct.
Yeah, because the tendency that we have is that once we have something working like an agent or a small loop interaction over a chat like Slack or something,
Hmm.
we said, okay, now it's working. It's okay. I'm gonna check for error logs, and if it's not erroring out, it's doing all right. And it's not like that, right? That we don't know what the agent is doing at the end of the day. So is it really like solving the problem? So
Hmm.
giving the opportunity to allow the user to like emoji with a response, or like give a thumbs up or thumbs down or something,
Yeah.
does come a long way.
Yeah, and there's an interesting question from Amina. Is saying is evaluating things like sentiment analysis to evaluate the user satisfaction after the agent tasks. So basically, when you get a response from the user, you're running through a sentiment classification and see if that message was positive or negative, instead of like waiting for the user to give you a thumb up or a thumb down. Is that something that is also supported with the LangChain and LangGraph?
You could definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's also practice. So like you could even say, you could even see like on some coding agents that they try to parse the user input even statically, to
Hmm.
try to get the idea of like, is the user upset or not, right?
Okay.
And that is it's another way to get indirect feedback. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's actually a good way because the node that you are going to build, if we're talking about line graph, the node that you're building after each response, it's not going to use the LM calls. It can just use like some classification cheap models that would just say tell if that's up or down, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can even like correlate that with the size of the history, right? Like, is this being a long thread, a complex one? Then
Hmm.
I might ask an agent to classify for me. If it's not, try to use a cheap one, and then you try to cost optimize your feedback gathering.
Yeah. And you can also use a combination of those. So we can have the human feedback, you can have the classification of the responses, and then you build your data, and then when you look at it as a human, then you can clean it and try to draw some um, uh, some feedback for them for the data that you're building. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
that's an interesting one. And do you see? So do you have any like you mentioned that when you build an agent, you should think about those parameters, like the maximum number of tokens that an output should produce, what you're feeding in, etc. Um, but when we talk about the tool calling and everything, when you're trying to make your agent smarter, you're feeding it more context because you're feeding it more tools, and each tool would come with a definition and how to use that tool. And basically, that's also what the MCP server does: is it gives you definition of all the tools that it has, and it's up to the model to choose what to call in that server, etc. Do you see that? I'm implying one thing here, which is the schools, the thing that you told me about offline. Do you see that this pattern is changing now with deep agents?
Actually, the pages helps you with that a little bit.
Mhm.
I would say that there is a few things that you can do to, because context rot and context management is a big thing when you try to build an agent yourself. Uh, that's why also skills pop up and got some traction, right? Because it
Mm.
doesn't rot the context so much like MCPs. And allows the agent to kind of look for a tool on demand, right? Based on grep and search in the file system or things like that.
Mhm.
And in terms of deep agents, actually, it's not as much as a replacement, but it's trying to work with the problem. So like deep agents has a context management built in. It allows you to summarize chats. So if things become too cluttered, yeah, it just reduces the context. It has if the context is becoming too big, another technique that you can use is sub-agent, right? So
Hmm.
you use a sub-agent architecture, try to split up the work and get the summary of the result back. Those are all features built into deep agents. Also, if you want to use skills, right, you're going to have a VM, you're going to need a VM, and you're going to need a shell access, file
Hmm.
system access. This is all built in into deep agents as well. So there are actually plenty of techniques that tries to help you reduce context rot and yeah, over overload in the context window. But it's just like a, I think a forever long-standing problem that I think we're gonna have with LLMs. It's gonna be a fight. Then we get better models with bigger context, and we can breathe a little bit, and then we're gonna have more features that will use it all again. So I think we can treat the context window like a part of the hardware. Is a
Hmm.
constraint that we have, and we need to work with it. And we have many techniques to try to help it out.
Yeah, and one of the techniques that you mentioned is delegating the task. So it's basically like saying that you, when you are a human and you're building a startup, at the beginning you're doing everything. You're doing the HR work, you're doing the development work, and then you're doing the marketing work. And as you grow, the tasks become, your context becomes, as a human you are also limited in terms of context, and the tasks and what you need to know and what you need to manage grows. So what you do is you create a department for each of the tasks. You're creating a sub agent for each one of the tasks, and then when each department becomes bigger, then you create sub department, etc., etc. So it's, I think it's the same approach when building agents. You start with one, and then you you monitor and observe its behavior and how it works, and then if there's a need to create or to sub delegate things, then you create a sub departments. Is that
Yeah.
safe to say?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But also, like, if you think about it, because the idea is to build long-running agents, the long-running impact impacts a lot.
Hmm.
Because even if you're dealing with not so many things anymore, you have sub-agents and departments to take care of stuff. Over time, you're gonna get overloaded again. So you need to be able to forget things. You need to be able to store important things so you can look it up later, right? And those are all features that you need to build, put in your agent if you want to have long running agents, which is like why deep agents was created in the first place.
Okay. So the deep agent was created specifically to solve the long running issue, right?
Yeah, long running issue and all the other features you need to have the agent to do more things, right? So like run commands and things like that. uh, and that's my understanding of a harness. Yeah, so
Hmm.
it's that plus features plus prompt optimization is like everything else that goes around, that can go around an LLM provider.
Okay, that's interesting to know. So when you talk about all those techniques of optimization, we have the prompting, the tool calling, um, what you mentioned, which is like sandboxing using the CLI and things. Do you see? And I want to have your opinion about this. Lately, they just, I mean, there are a lot of posts on LinkedIn saying that the MCP is over with and it's dead. Do you, how, what's your take on that? Do you see it? Do you share the same idea, or do you think that MCP is uh, can still be there even if we have all those capabilities that the agent can just use the CLI to do whatever it wants and then grep and then think? Do you still see that we should treat the LLMs as kids and we should provide them with all those big instructions, or we should treat them as expert adults to whom we give our prompt and our question and just leave them figure it out?
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
first, I don't think MCPs are completely dead, although they do need a lot of changes because the context overload is just a massive problem.
Mhm.
So, and also LLMs tend to work better with uh, higher levels of abstraction, like humans, right?
Mhm.
So, what is easier for us to go on an API spec and try to figure out the API calls, or just look at the CLI and do dash dash help? So, what is easier for us is going to be easier for the LLM as well.
Mhm.
So they do need to change, but I wouldn't say that we are there yet. I still think the interface between agents and systems are still need to be built, like the de
Mhm.
facto one, because you need to convey all of that. It needs to be intuitive enough to be easy to understand. You need to have a back and forth to so you don't get dumped all that is possible in one go, but also it would be nice to not have to have an entire virtual machine for you to do those things, right?
Mhm.
So, and there, I don't think there is something like that in the market. So I think that kind of interface is still going to be built. So today, I think we're gonna see a little bit of both, because it's CLIs are definitely more intuitive and you can get better results. But you need to know how to interact with the sandbox, which we are building. Yeah, those kind of infrastructures, making it as simple to use as possible, but still something that you're gonna have to keep an eye for. It's gonna be a dependency of your agent, and the less dependencies, the better. But you have also other reasons to use sandboxes, but the interface between a system and an agent, I think we're not there yet. So I think we're gonna see CLIs and MCPs and maybe something else all fighting together to see what sticks. But in terms of how to treat an agent, if we should treat it as a child and lock it in, or if we should treat it as an adult and hope for the best, uh, I think it might be something in the middle, because if you lock it too much, then you are putting an agent, which is a piece of software designed to do things that you never expected, right? Because it
Mhm.
should solve problems that you never saw before.
Right.
Uh, so you cannot lock it in, because if you lock it, then you won't be able to do things that you wanted to do, right? You might as well just ask an agent to build a script, and then you run the script, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is like the major difference between augmenting and delegating. When you're looking to build some tool that would uh, augment your capabilities, so basically you know what you want to do, and you know the workflow, and you know what to expect. So you're building on the first case where you're grounding to the maximum your LM to do exactly what you expect it to do. But if we're looking for delegation and creating basically it look alike of a human assistant or a human developer, you need to give more freedom. And I think it's basically the same thing that Anthropic is doing with their cloud model, where they give it the possibility to test whatever it wants to test, so that they can come up with something that is um that is that's doing something that's never done, as you qualified it. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting way to look for it. But talking about this, how do you manage the security aspect of all of this? You mentioned sandboxes, CLIs. Do you think that we should manage the RBAC and security of what the agent and tools have access to on the software level, or also on the hardware level? And by that I mean, instead of us creating API keys and putting them in environment variables for specific tools, if we give access to CLI in a sandbox, should we limit the access of the whole sandbox, I think, or the whole machine or the whole VM? Or where do you see where the people, or where do people manage the RBAC or the security aspects of the agent? Is it on the software level or even at the other layers?
Yeah, because yeah, as you said, like I think the idea is to treat the agent as like an innocent adult. So you still give the keys, but what you allow it to touch, you should not care too much, or at least you should have a way to test it. So that's why you see infrastructures like sandboxes coming as well.
Yeah.
It's not only to allow an agent that is running remotely to have a shell, but it is also to give it an ephemeral environment that it can break. So if
Mhm.
if it ever does something wrong, you should not care about it. You should be able to roll back. You should be able to continue from another point. You should not care too much, right? So the sweet spot is to allow the agent to spread its legs and try different things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but if it ever tries to do a deletion or something like that, it should not be allowed, or it should be deleting something that should not care. But that's why you have sandboxes, and also things like approach like human in the loop for dangerous actions, and some techniques like that.
Mm-hmm.
But talking about sandboxes specifically, right? Because one of the things that they allow that is quite neat is that, yes, when you want to give a permission to an agent to do something, right? I think you have kind of three categories right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is you can give the agent itself an identification, like an API key, and then the agent itself has permissions to interact with the system.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also use OAuth, for example, to impersonate the user of an agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not what the agent can do, is what the user of the agent can do, is what the agent can do. Those two approaches, they can, it's a matter of use case, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
because if you have an agent that can do whatever the user can do, and the user is admin, right, then the
Yeah.
agent is admin. So you need to think
Right.
about that.
Mm-hmm.
But if the other way around, if the agent has access itself, then who can access the agent has that access by proxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that you should think about on a feature by feature. You could think about that uh, use case by use case. There's no really right answer. But for example, with sandboxes, you can also give permissions to the box as well,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So as long as the agent can interact with that box, the agent can perform those actions. So
Yeah.
this is also a way to promote access to an agent. But it goes very similar to those two approaches that I said, right? Either the agent has the access, either if it has the credentials or if it has access to a box of credentials,
Mm-hmm.
or the user using the agent has the access. And yeah, but the how to build it is very dependent on the use case. So like if you want to build an agent that controls your infrastructure, keep an
Yeah.
eye on the leads and things like that.
Yeah, and it becomes so complex at this stage because when you say, for example, impersonating the user who's chatting with the agent, you're implying that if I'm in an organization, all the role management and RBAC in my organization should be aligned so that I can the services that I'm using, the tools, in the same way or the same provider, etc. And if we also talk about having sandboxes inherit some kind of or have a specific role, then it becomes a problem, for example, for a mutual environment. So if we have, let's just assume that we we are creating an agent that would interact with Langsmith, and in Langsmith we have multiple silos. We have, for example, the ops team and the dev team. They have different, let's just say, dashboards, and that sandbox, if the agent is only on the team with the ops team, then it should only have access to that realm of data, where the sandbox has read access on everything. So it becomes the very hard problem to solve, and thus I think it's something that you should test, account for, but also observe later on, so that you can know, or audit, so that you can know what your agent is trying to access, and like with iteration, try to figure out how your agent is interacting with the tool, so that you can figure out what type of RBAC and what type of things you should go, what type of restrictions you should put on each component. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. I don't know.
I think
Yeah,
I think also we can always try to inspire ourselves based on how we operate.
yeah,
So like how in a company we get access to things, right? At the beginning, you don't care about anything. You're admin, but at
Yeah.
some point, if the company is too big, you need to request approval, right?
Yeah.
Why you can't build the same thing on agents? So like you give it read access to most things. Of
Hmm.
course, keep an eye on PII data and things like that. But as soon as the agent wants to do something, it has built in into its workflow a process to request access, and it gets a temporary token to do that. So instead of allowing the agent to write change a system by default, or
Hmm.
even a user, the agent has integrated a process to request for access, and then you can, it's basically a way to put a human in the loop, right? But not for everything, just for more dangerous actions. And then you
Yeah.
can look at the agent and say, why is it requesting write access, right? It would
Mhm.
be the same idea as what we do today between ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, we have a lot of topics to talk about. What we are at the 1 hour. So Daniel, thank you very much for taking part in this interesting and really. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much the talk that we had. Do you have any words that you want to tell us, or anything that you want to share with us before we close the session?
Well, no, just thank you so much for inviting. It was a very nice chat, very cool.
Yeah.
And also, anyone, feel free to connect with me and on LinkedIn. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So how was your experience overall? Was it chill? Or did you feel being asked a lot of questions, or was it chill?
No, super chill, super chill, super. Next time we can do later during the day because then I can crack a beer.
Yes,
but
that's for sure. We can do it at night in that case.
but yeah, no, super right, man. Very nice.
Yeah. So perfect. Uh, I think we will have another session with you in the future. Looking forward for that. Yeah. And thank you, I mean, for always being the fun number one. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one.
Thank you. Bye.